an average American guy. Chapter 5. John had 30 days leave and wanted to spend it with his family, but he wanted desperately to spend it with Cary Lee. So they went together to Snowden's jewelry store, where she ordered a promise ring for John. While there, she saw a wedding engagement set she liked. She didn't say anything, but John noticed her looking over the wedding engagement rings and so stepped over to where she was. Nice. Which do you like? She pointed out the set she liked, and John asked the clerk about the price. The lady took it out and handed it to Cary Lee. This set is $3,897. Then the clerk whispered to John, next week there will be a sale, and I can sell it to you for $3,500 even. John winked at the clerk, wrote out a check for $2,000, and slipped it to her. He whispered, I'll be back on Tuesday. Okay? The lady nodded, yes. The following Tuesday, John went to Snowden's jewelry store and asked about the wedding engagement set. The lady reached down and gave John the little velvet-covered box. John opened it. Perfect. Thank you. John gave her a check for the remainder of the cost, smiled, and turned to leave. The lady asked, that girl that ordered you a promise ring, is she the lucky one? John smiled, oh yes. She is the one. Again, the lady asked, when are you going to propose? John replied, we're going to have dinner and dance tonight. I'll get down on one knee in the middle of the dance floor and ask her to marry me. The lady replied, good luck. To which he replied, thanks, I'll need it. The lady responded, a handsome guy like you, I bet she'll melt all over you. John blushed, smiled, waved, and left. John picked Cary Lee up and went to a nightclub for dinner and dancing. After dinner, they danced, and then at the end of one tune, John took Cary Lee's hand, dropped to one knee, and said, Cary Lee Wade, I love you, and I need you. He took the velvet box out of his pocket, held it up, and asked, Cary Lee, will you marry me? The dance crowd had all stopped and watched as Cary Lee blushed. She replied, oh John, yes, yes, yes. And the crowd all applauded and congratulated the blushing couple. They walked back to their table, and the band began to play a jazzed-up version of the wedding march. John said, we just need to set the date. Do you want one of those weddings with a million guests, caterers, wedding planners, long white gowns, tuxedos, and such? She replied, that's what Margie got, but that's not me. I want a simple wedding, like a ceremony after the Sunday service. John said, this Sunday? She replied, yes. This Sunday. He replied, let's get the license tomorrow and talk to the pastor. Okay? She replied, okay. John took Cary Lee home and asked her family how they felt about Cary Lee and him getting married Sunday. Mr. Wade responded, well, if that is what Cary Lee wants, great. John, you know I approve of you as a son-in-law. Mrs. Wade hugged Cary Lee and cried, it's too soon. It's too soon. Mr. Wade said, darling, you know we have to let our kids go. She replied, I know, but it's too soon. Cary Lee replied, Mom, I'm the same age as Margie was when she got married. I just don't want that toxic foolishness. A simple church wedding after the morning service is all I want. Well, John and I. John just stood there smiling with his arm around Cary Lee. Cary Lee's parents said, well, Sunday it is. We'll notify the family. Mr. Wade said, I don't think Larry and Margie will be there, but we'll let them know. John and Cary Lee went to City Hall, bought the license, called their pastor, asked to speak with him, and went into a music store. John bought 2 cassette tapes. Cary Lee asked what he bought, and he told her, I bought these for 2 songs that were very popular in Vietnam. She asked what songs. He replied, we gotta get out of this place, by the Animals, and Take This Job and Shove It, by Johnny Paycheck. These songs express the feelings of almost every one of us in Nam. At the appointed time, they visited their pastor and told him they wanted to get married. The pastor said it did not give him much time to do the counseling he usually gave. John and Cary Lee said, well, if you have the time, we could come here today, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Would that be enough time? He said, well, okay. My calendar is clear this week, we can start right now. So, every day at 1, the pastor spent an hour counseling the lovers. Plans were made for the wedding after the morning service. On Thursday, John and Cary Lee went to a clothing store to get a suit and dress suitable for their wedding. The pastor asked, "What comes after the wedding?" John replied, "I still have a year left on my enlistment. I've been assigned to Fort Bliss. We have decided to rent a furnished apartment in El Paso. And we'll decide what to do at the end of my enlistment. A good possibility is staying in the Army." The pastor asked Cary Lee, "How do you feel about that? Army life is often difficult." Cary Lee replied, "We have talked about that, and we will continue to talk about it until we have to decide. But right now, anywhere with John." John drove over to the Wade's home to pick up the bride. When he got there, he saw Cary Lee and Margie. Margie walked over to John. "Good morning, John." He replied, "Morning, Margie. Are you happy?" She replied, "Yes, John, yes I am." He replied, "I'm glad." Next, he spotted Larry and went over to him. "Larry, you'd better take good care of her." Then John took Cary Lee by the arm and helped her into the car. She said, "Margie is going to be my maid of honor if that's okay with you." John smiled, "Just so long as you are happy." Then, she asked, "Will you have a best man?" He replied, "Well, there's Peter." They arrived at the church and went in. As they walked to a pew close to the front, John saw a very familiar face. "Honey, I want you to meet my best friend from Vietnam." And he introduced her to Gunnery Sergeant Alan Smith. "Alan, ain't this a long way from home?" Alan answered, "I heard you and Cary Lee were going to tie the knot. I wanted to be here and see it myself." John turned to Cary Lee. "Cary Lee, this is Alan Smith." "Alan, this is my Cary Lee Wade, soon to be Cary Lee Tolliver." "Alan, would you be my best man?" Alan responded, "It would be my honor." "Cary Lee, this guy is the best EOD man in the Army and my friend." "John, she is just as you described, absolutely beautiful. I'll pray for your happiness every day from now on." At about that time, the pastor stepped up to the pulpit and asked everyone to take their seats. Then the first announcement out of his mouth was about the wedding after the service, and the Wades are hosting a reception in Fellowship Hall after the ceremony is finished. Jean and Mary Wade invite everyone to help celebrate with John and Cary Lee. After the service, the pastor asked for the wedding party to stand before the congregation for the wedding ceremony. After exchanging vows and rings, the pastor announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Staff Sergeant John and Mrs. Cary Lee Tolliver. John, you may kiss your bride." John took Cary Lee in his arms, did the dip, and kissed her like never before. Then he stood her upright, grabbed her hand, and they ran to the fellowship hall. Margie and Alan quickly followed. John spent the next half hour introducing Gunnery Sergeant Alan Smith, a friend he had made on the bus on the way to Fort Lee, and was my friend in Vietnam. During the reception, Mr. Wade announced that John's best man should say a word about John, and Margie should say a word about Cary Lee. Alan stood. "I want to tell you about a selfless, courageous, compassionate soldier, Staff Sergeant John Thomas Tolliver. John had helped my unit by defusing 2 dud rockets. The first one was the easiest. It was stuck in the berm, and John took about an hour to defuse it. The other, John, had 1 week left in country when I asked him for help. A new type of rocket had slammed into a hooch, trapping 5 Marines. Again, John took about an hour to defuse the rocket and free the 5 Marines. John's helper asked him where he got the guts to do this kind of work, and John replied, "I do what I have to, especially when lives are at stake." John Tolliver has more courage, just plain guts, than any other man I know. I believe Cary Lee is getting the best of the best. The finest EOD man in the Army. Then Alan added, "Just to let you know about John Tolliver, he was awarded the Silver Star for courage by General Westmoreland himself." Everyone was absolutely silent. Then everyone stood, and Mr. Wade said, "I think I speak for everyone here, John Thomas Tolliver, thank you for your loyal service to our country." And everyone in the room applauded. Then, one of the guests asked, "What's a hooch?" Alan explained, "It's what we might call a barracks for tropical weather, mostly screened to allow air to flow through, but has a good roof and louvers to keep the sun and rain out." Margie stood up and said, with tears in her eyes and a sob in her voice, "I don't think I could possibly say anything about Cary Lee that would equal what Sergeant Smith said." But my sister is the kindest, gentlest, most loving, and giving girl I know. And I believe she deserves a man like John. So, John, you just make sure to take good care of my sister, and Cary Lee, you take care of John." John shook Alan's hand and thanked him for the kind words. And Cary Lee hugged Margie, then Alan. As John hugged Margie, he whispered to her, "Be happy." She replied, "You too." Then John and Cary Lee scooted out and made a beeline for their hotel room. It was 3 days before anybody saw John or Cary Lee. When asked what they had been doing, all they would do was smile. The month's leave was nearing the end, so John and Cary Lee packed up and headed toward Fort Bliss. Early on, John had contacted a realtor in El Paso and had made the necessary payments to secure a furnished apartment. The happy couple arrived in El Paso 3 days before his leave was up, but John went to the post personnel office to register Cary Lee as his wife. When John walked into personnel and told the clerk who he was, the clerk grabbed the phone and told someone on the other end, "Sir, Staff Sergeant Tolliver is here in front of my desk." Next, a chief warrant officer approached John. "Sergeant Tolliver, I'm Chief Warrant Officer Petty. May I shake your hand?" John reached out his hand. He was perplexed. "Sir, what's this all about?" The chief replied, "Sergeant Tolliver, we have orders to tell you that Marine General Michael Johnson will arrive here in 6 days to present you with the Medal of Honor." John said, "Sir, I'm not due to sign in until Monday. I came in to turn in my records and report my marriage." The chief turned, "Specialist Gordon here, will take care of all that. Monday, you will report to the Command Sergeant Major of the 174th, that's in the building next door." John replied, "Yes, sir." So Specialist Gordon did take care of everything. After about an hour and a half, John returned to their apartment, picked up Cary Lee, and the two went to the Post Exchange, PX, commissary, took in the movie at the main theater, and had dinner and danced at the NCO club. Monday morning, John reported to the Command Sergeant Major, where he was briefed on the award ceremony that afternoon. He was to bring Cary Lee to lunch at noon. They would be dining with the Commanding General, Marine General Johnson, and the 174th's commander in the Officers Club. John asked, "Sergeant Major, will you be there?" The Sergeant Major replied, "You will be the only enlisted Slav there." At lunch, John ate sparingly. General Johnson asked, "Sergeant Tolliver, are you well?" John answered, "Yes, sir. But with the rarefied atmosphere here, it seems to be an inappropriate place for poor white trash to be dining." The general looked at the officers around the table. "John, you are far from being poor white trash. I apologize if you have been uncomfortable, that was never my intention. There is one thing I need to explain. When the Joint Chiefs reviewed this award, they asked the President to be allowed to make this presentation here at Fort Bliss. The Joint Chiefs also decided that you should be awarded the Navy version of the medal." The general continued, "There will be a surprise at the ceremony. Just a heads up. I'm glad your wife will be there to enjoy the proceedings." John was awarded the Medal of Honor at the ceremony. Then a group of Marines and an Army sergeant were introduced. First was Sergeant Mark Vargas, then Gunnery Sergeant Alan Smith, and the 5 Marines that had been trapped in that hooch by the beast. Every man introduced hugged John and thanked him for saving their lives. Later, John, Alan, Mark, and the 5 retired to the NCO club, where wives were introduced. All enjoyed a fine meal, dancing, laughter, and camaraderie. John and Cary Lee were dancing when Cary Lee whispered in his ear, "John, let's go home." They went over to where Alan was sitting. "Alan, it's been a long day for us. We'll just say good night and go home." Alan smiled, "Good night, John, Cary Lee. We will go tomorrow early, but we'll keep in touch." With that, John and Cary Lee went home. The next day, John reported for duty and was asked to report to the battalion commander. In the colonel's office, the commander asked, "Sergeant Tolliver, I have to ask you a question. Why did you put your life on the line defusing the rocket in the tropical barracks?" John replied, "Sir, I was asked by my friend, Gunnery Sergeant Smith, and we needed to know about this latest model rocket. It was my job, my duty, and the lives of 5 U.S. Marines were at stake." The colonel asked, "Which of those reasons was uppermost in your mind?" John replied, "Sir, the lives of those Marines." The colonel, again, asked, "What about your own life?" John thought, "Sir, the whole job was a crapshoot. If I had been unable to defuse the rocket, 6 of us would have been shipped home in body bags. But, I had the most experience of any man in the area. So my chances were pretty good." The colonel said, "Thank you, Sergeant. You're dismissed." John asked, "Sir, may I ask a question?" The colonel replied, "Certainly. What do you need to know?" John said, "I had only a couple of days left in country. But I was asked to defuse a rocket jammed in the launch tube of a Hugh. The next day General Westmoreland pinned a Silver Star on me. My question is, does the Medal of Honor supersede the Silver Star?" The colonel replied, "No. You will retain the Silver Star. From what I know, both awards are well deserved." "Thank you, Sergeant. I guess we had both get back to work." Dismissed. John saluted and returned to his company. John and Cary Lee were insanely happy. They both would rise at the same time, and both drive on to Fort Bliss. Cary would drop John off at his company, and then she would attend one of the many activities available to families of the soldiers. She would swim 3 afternoons a week, she would attend a wives' club once a week, she would go to the gym twice a week, have her hair done once a week, and at the end of the day, pick up John and go home. After several months, she found a part-time job at the flower shop on post. At the end of the day, John would find her waiting for him, twisting her wedding ring. John asked her about the ring twisting, and she replied, "At the flower shop, a lot of guys are hitting on me. I'm reminding myself that I'm your woman." John asked, "A lot of different guys or a few guys over and over?" She replied, "I don't know. All I know is it's annoying." John thought about that, then one day, he was in the flower shop when some guy started hitting on Cary Lee. John stepped around, took the guy by the throat, and said, "That's my wife." Cary Lee held up her left hand, wiggling her wedding ring. John went on, "You had better do your business here without annoying her." The guy made to leave when John told him, "Tell everyone you know about this little incident because I will take offense at any other occasion of my wife being annoyed." Get my drift? The fellow nodded and hurried out of the shop. Cary Lee kissed John, and he said, "There is a class on self-defense at the gym on Tuesday and Thursday evenings." Cary Lee answered, "I think I would like to enroll." John became her practice dummy. John had 2 weeks left on his enlistment, and as he was teaching a class on the Model X rocket used by the VC, the company commander interrupted, "Sergeant Tolliver, I need you." John answered, "Sir?" "TWA Flight 1011 just landed at Biggs Field. They have the report of a bomb aboard. You are the most experienced EOD man in the whole Fort Bliss, El Paso area. Will you look at the aircraft? There's a Jeep waiting." John turned, "I'll need my tools." And he left the class, got his tools, and went to Biggs Field. John saw a Boeing 727 on the airstrip and went to the plane. The aircraft was filled with passengers, some stoic, some crying silently, some hysterical. John called to the captain, "What do we know about the bomb?" The captain replied, "Very little. We were told that it's somewhere on this plane. And when a certain person stands up, the bomb will go off." John replied, "I'm Sergeant Tolliver, I'm an EOD expert. I'm coming up," John said, "First things first. Please remain calm. I will inspect your seat, and when I'm done with your seat, you may leave the aircraft." It took 5 minutes to inspect a seat thoroughly, and there were 87 passengers, so it took over 6 hours to get everyone off the aircraft. TWA sent a bus to shuttle the freed passengers to El Paso International. Again, it took just over 6 hours to finally find a suspicious seat. A stunning stewardess was sitting on the seat, and John had to work around her legs. She was scared but tried to be as calm as possible. John inspected the package, removed the camouflage covering, traced the circuits, and then cut the wire he had determined was the one. John remained on the floor and told the stewardess to stand. As she slowly stood, John heard a snap and then nothing. He stood, and the stewardess flung her arms around him, sobbing, kissing him, thanking him for saving her life. John asked for a ground crewman to remove the seat from the aircraft. That being done, John took the bomb, seat and all, to the bomb disposal site and detonated the bomb at a safe distance. John found that the bomb would have blown the entire rear section of the aircraft off. When John returned to his company, Cary Lee grabbed him, kissed him, then stood back sobbing and hit him. John Thomas Tolliver, never do that again. John held her. Darling, there were 87 passengers and 5 crewmen. I couldn't let them just die. She replied, of course not. You great big hunk of man. Of course not. She pounded her fist against his chest. I was so afraid I would lose you. He held her tight, but this is who I am. This is my job. You have to understand, I can't just let people die. She looked him in the eye. Next time, you tell me about it before you go and put your life on the line. I don't care if you have to send your whole battalion out to find me, she yelled, first. Then she turned and looked at John's commander, and you had better make sure that he tells me. The captain smiled and patted her shoulder. Of course, it was thoughtless of us. I hope that it won't happen again. John saluted the captain. Sir, may I take tomorrow off? I'm exhausted. The captain said, Sergeant Tolliver, take the rest of the week off. See you Monday. John and Cary Lee went home.